get my 6. What's up, guys? Getting ready to split some wood, as you can tell here, but I thought I'd take a minute first to tell you a very creepy story, one I just heard a couple of evenings ago myself. Hear that creepy little noise? Those are pine beetles. This wood is pine. Let me show you my really neat setup I've got here. So you can see I've got the log splitter moved into the center of my area here. I've got rounds all cut up. Here's the giant pine tree that fell a couple of months ago. Slowly but surely, I'm getting it. Again, something like this, it can seem overwhelming. You get a big giant tree fall, you're like, oh my gosh, that's too much work. I can't do that. Well, yeah, probably not all at once. But if you go out and spend an hour on it every 2 or 3 days, next thing you know, a couple months, 3 months later, it's gone. So the pine, when it fell, it went all the way up into that apple orchard, but we got it cut all the way back down to here. All we've pretty much got left is the big base, the giant trunk root system. Going to bash that up with sledgehammers and chainsaws when we get to it. But we cut, stack the rounds, split, and then we stack over here. I've got it covered up, most of it there, because we had some rain a couple days ago. But that's our operation. But now, story time. Okay, so this story is an example as to how we really, you've heard it said, careful what you ask for because you just might get it. Well, we need to be careful what we pray for because we just might get that as well. And this isn't my story. This is a story relayed to me by a gentleman who's in his 70s. Just met him a couple days ago. You know, when one of my sisters and her daughter was down here a while back, and we were down in Charlottesville, and I was showing them the town. I told him one of the things I love most about living here, and people often ask you that. You know, if you're at a football game and you meet someone from out of town, you tell them you love it here, and they ask you why. Well, one of the reasons is the people. I told my sister and my niece there's a very youthful mindset here. There's a mindset of positivity. And by that, here's what I mean. I don't mean necessarily because it's a college town, there's 30,000 students here. Even what you might call the elderly, and they probably wouldn't like hearing that word because they don't see themselves as that, have a youthful mindset, a youthful attitude, and a youthful way in which they carry themselves. 70 people in their 70s, people in their 80s. Here, it's not old for so many of them. Now, you go to a lot of places, especially a lot of repressed areas, and it's like people at that age are sitting around waiting to die. And, you know, you'll say, oh, I saw so-and-so's obituary last week. I guess mine's a-coming, you know, and they just complain about every little ache and pain. Here, you'll meet people in their 70s and 80s who, now, they're physically active. It's because of lifestyle choices throughout their life. They were always active. They were always exercising. They engaged their minds. You'll hear them talking about how excited they are to go on their next safari. I mean, when COVID's over and they can travel around the world again, they're going to Africa. And these are people in their 80s. So it's like, I think they're just going to not wake up someday and that's the end. But I think between now and then, they don't seem to spend much time thinking about it, if you know what I'm saying. And that's contagious. That positivity, because negativity is contagious as well. You know, and when you just complain about any little problem you think you might have, or if you create problems, I mean, the best way to find trouble is to go looking for it. And if that's who you are, stay away from me. So anyway, with this said, this is how I came across a gentleman who's probably, well, he's late 70s, a couple of days ago, that told me this story. There are times when, you know, I love to spend most of my time out here on the homestead, splitting wood, doing, you know, my trees I'm obsessed with. So, oh, you know, a tree would look good right there. So then I got to go find the right tree and transfer it. And then, of course, always keeping an eye out for him, her, it, or they. So keep watching back there. You never know what or who might show up. But from time to time, I feel like being social, but I don't really want to commit to, like, maybe having a friend come over, going to see a friend. And I do enjoy that at times. But it's like my house is my castle. And when I want to be social, I want to do it on the other side of the property line. That's just, and I think a lot of you are like that. So I'll go into town and there's always something going on, either a sporting event, there's all kinds of cultural stuff. You got the downtown mall where there's, on the weekends, thousands of people, music everywhere. So I was out there a couple days ago, ran into an older gentleman, just started small talking. And it came up, what do I do? And I'm telling you, I don't know why, but when you tell people you're from West Virginia, that you're a YouTuber, you're a writer, any of those three things, they just laugh at you. That's just how it is. So I'm used to it. So I told him I was a writer and he laughed. And I don't even write comedy, but whatever. So he asked me what's the kind of stuff I write about. And I told him I don't, pigeonhole myself into one genre. Whatever story is up here that needs to be told, that wants to be told, I tell it. Even though most of my successes come from paranormal, supernatural, cryptozoology type stuff, I've written romances like The Box, which, by the way, there's I think 5 or 6 of those left on our Etsy store. I put 25 on there yesterday. They're almost gone. If you want an autographed copy, go over to the Etsy store there while they're still in supply. So after he laughed, and when he was laughing, I told him, by the way, I grew up in West Virginia too, laugh at that. And he did, but then he asked me why I said that. And I said, well, you laughed, didn't you? And he was like, yeah. And I'm like, that's just how it goes. So the conversation, he mentioned how he used to hike all the time, but now he mostly bicycles daily. I mean, daily. This is one of those guys, he probably goes by my house every day in his 70s and out there putting in 30 or 40 miles on a bike. And that's why 20 years from now, he's going to still be doing it. He's not sitting around waiting to die. He's looking for the next adventure. But there's one adventure he took back in the 1970s that he came back around to tell me about that he'll never take again. He just stopped. He paused in the middle of conversation. And he said, you write about supernatural, paranormal type stuff. He says, do you actually believe in that kind of stuff? And I told him, I said, to be completely honest with you, this is what I believe. I believe that just about anything's possible. I believe that just because there may be things that we can't see or hear or touch or taste, or maybe that some can and others can't, doesn't mean that they're not real and that they don't exist. And it could be that we just don't have the technology yet to read certain things. And he goes, I had something happen in the 1970s. He said, I've never had anything happen like it before, and I've never had anything like it happen since. And he says, before you think I'm crazy, he says it could be attributed to dehydration. It could be attributed to hunger. It could be attributed to extreme exhaustion. I'm like, come on, get on with it, sir. What happened? So he said back in the 1970s, he had been married for about 5 years to his first wife. Now he's with wife number 2 now, and he's been with her 30 plus years. But his first marriage only lasted about 5 years. He said his first wife was absolutely gorgeous, drop dead gorgeous, but she knew it, and she had a problem with infidelity, I guess is how I'll put it. She liked the attention that other men gave her for her looks, and she took opportunities when opportunities presented themselves. But the problem was she'd said I do to this guy. So he had finally gotten to the point to where he had enough. And she had finally gotten involved with a guy that she wanted to be her main thing. And so it was amicably decided that this marriage was going to end. He said that was because he knew about her extracurricular activities. He had always suspected, but then once he got proof, he was ready to just part ways too. Because this wasn't one of these guys with a low self-esteem, My attitude has always been, I don't chase, I replace. His was the same. Hey, all right, girl, you want him, you go. You know how many others there are out there? There's a billion. Now, I've found my one in a billion, and I have her, and there's just no chasing or replacing going on here, because this whole thing of anybody else existing in our eyes, it just doesn't happen. So, but anyway, she kicked him when he was down. She let him know that their 3-year-old son was not his. It was the result of one of her extracurricular activities with another guy. And this hurt the guy because he loved this kid. And she was doing it to hurt him and to try to get him to exit their lives. You know, she didn't want him involved in that child's life. She wanted a check from this guy every month, and she wanted him out of the picture. Not an uncommon situation, unfortunately, as many of you watching this knows. Get that check, keep the guy out of the picture, and then, of course, always refer to the guy as a deadbeat dad. So anyway, he was enraged. Somebody suggested that he just take a very long hike. And so his first thought was the Appalachian Trail. He's going to hike the Appalachian Trail. Not the whole thing. He said he wasn't going to go to Maine and go to Georgia, or start in Georgia and hike to Maine. But he was going to hike the part that crossed through our part of Central Virginia. So he did. He made his arrangements. And he said back then it was not uncommon, and they still do it now, but not to the degree that they did back in the 70s. He said the Charles Manson thing changed so much. So there were people who had homes along the trail or within a mile or so off of the trail down in the small communities. Some people had barns, and what they would do is they just set up a loft. Like if they had a barn that was like half a mile off the trail, they'd put a bed in the barn or in the loft, and they made sure there were amenities such as, you know, at least an outhouse or somewhere where the people on the trail could stop and for free of charge rest for the night, stay a day or two. They could walk into the small communities and get any supplies they needed. So this gentleman reached such a place. He set up in Madison County, which is north of here. I've been up there. It's absolutely beautiful. And he said he walked off the trail because he knew there was one such area nearby. And I'm on my knees. I got to make an adjustment here. So he found the barn, he found the loft, he found the bed. He got there just before dark. He didn't even go to the farmhouse to bother the people that lived there. He wasn't sure if they were even home or not. He was exhausted, and he went up the loft, plopped his stuff down. There was like a oil lamp, actually, even though it's in the 70s. This is kind of old timey even for them, but he lit the oil lamp, and he sat down in a chair to stare at the bed. And he said that in his mind, he had been enraged because he had just been thinking about this thing this woman had done to him, you know, kicking him when he's down, telling him this kid wasn't his biological child. And he said that he had come to hate her and that he wanted to take her out. Okay, that's how I've got to say it on social media. But he knew it just wasn't in his bones to do such a thing. So he said that he had been praying. Like the whole time he'd been taking this hike, and he'd been hiking for 3 or 4 days at this time, he'd been praying to be the type of person that could do such a thing because he simply knew he wasn't. And he was asking the Creator to endow upon him an evil that would allow him to take another human being's life because he so desperately wanted to do this with his separated wife. The divorce wasn't final, of course, at this time. So he says he's sitting there in that chair, and he's looking at the bed, and he just felt instantly like a presence on that bed. He sensed evil, and he could hear a light, diabolical laughter, as if someone or something was underneath those bed linens. So he jumped to his feet, he turned down the linens, and those pine beetles sound so creepy, don't they? People have often asked, why do you keep your firewood so far away from your house? Well, that's why. You keep those things, you keep it any closer and those things that get in your house. Can you imagine hearing that in the middle of the night? You just watch one of Crazy Lake's spooky ghost tales or Bigfoot Sasquatch videos on YouTube. You're going to bed all kind of creeped out anyway, and you hear that coming out from under the stairs. Firewood staying way far away from the house. Man, you think it'd creep you out. What do you think about me? I'm the guy whose head comes up with this stuff. Of course, I'm seeing a story here. All right, but my mind didn't come up with this stuff. This is the story the guy gave me. So he's looking at the bed, the linens are pulled down, and suddenly it's like an indention appears in the bed, in the mattress, and even in the pillow in the form of the shape of a head. As if someone was just beginning from out of nowhere to lay there. And he said he watched, he stared in horror. Of course, now all these years later, he's saying it could have been dehydration, exhaustion, hunger. But the shape came into being, and the face was that of wax, just a waxen face, no features at first, but features came, and the features were of anger and rage and hatred. And he said he looked into this face as it formed, and he just felt fear of this entity, as if this entity was capable of doing anything evil that it so desired. And he looked and he watched, and he realized as the face continued to take on features that face was his. And he was staring into the bed, he knew, into the face of a demonic being that was ready to enter his soul and do for him that which he could not do for himself, which was the purest of all things evil: take another human life. He said he was too scared to run. He was too terrified to call out and scream. And he watched this thing, and it opened its arms as if to welcome him into the bed to sleep with him. He said he dropped to his knees and he prayed to the God of his understanding, and he asked for forgiveness for having such ill intentions toward his wife of separation. And he said he didn't get up off of his knees, and he didn't stop praying, and he didn't even look into the bed to see if that thing was still there or not until the dawn's first light of the next morning. And he said when he saw the light creeping through the window and the oil lamp he had noticed had burnt out because it had gone through the oil, he opened his eyes, he stood up, he looked in the bed, and this entity was gone, though the indention that it had made was still there. That bed appeared to have been slept in, but he never got in that bed the whole night. He said he walked into the town, called his father on a payphone. That's how you can tell this story's old. There's a payphone in this story. And he had his father go up to Madison and pick him up. He didn't finish his hike. He said he started going to church for the first time in years, and he prayed for forgiveness for his separated wife for having done what she had done, and he prayed for forgiveness for having thought the thoughts he thought. Now, he said he's not an overly religious man. He said he goes to church from time to time now, like most Americans, like most good church-going Americans. He goes on Easter and Christmas. That's pretty much it. And the best part of the story is he never put any more thought into the fact that 3-year-old little boy at the time was not his biological child. And that 3-year-old little boy now is a 45-year-old man. He's just a couple years younger than me. And the old man said that he did tell the kid when he was old enough to kind of understand what was going on. But he said they're still very tightly knit father and son, and they're the best of friends. And in most days when he goes cycling, that 45-year-old man, his son, his best friend, goes with him. So the story did have a very good ending. But if we go back to its beginning, there in the 1970s, just about a mile off the Appalachian Trail up here in Madison County, story begins with a warning. Careful what you pray for, so you just might get it. I gotta split some wood. So that took all of 20 minutes. Look, folks, aside from being careful what you pray for, because you just might get it, get out there and get active. Get out there and do something. Don't be sitting around waiting to die. Sit around looking forward to your next safari or your next adventure, your next hike. Let's get out there and get busy. See you next time.